What happens when wisdom forgets humility? That is the question that hangs over the mists of Isengard tonight, curling through the black stone ring like smoke from a fire that has not yet started, but already smells of ruin. You walk along the damp grass outside the circle of Orthanc, the morning sun not yet risen, the chill mist painting your cloak silver. The sound of water dripping from the mountains folds into the faint hum of the Isen River, and in that half-light, the tower seems alive, breathing, watching, dreaming of dominion. Above, Saruman the White stands at a high window, his staff a shard of moonlight, his eyes burning with the reflection of something far older than himself. The crows circle the peak of the tower, as though they too can sense what stirs inside. A hunger not for food, but for knowledge, control, and the power to bend destiny's wheel. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm really curious, from which part of the world are you watching this video? Write your country in the comments. Let's see how far this little story has traveled. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step closer to the black stones, running your fingers across the ancient surface. Smooth, cold, older than the kingdom of men, and you feel the faint hum of the tower's secret heart. Orthanc was not built by Saruman, after all. It was raised by the men of Numenor long before his time, a relic of an age when knowledge and arrogance already walked hand in hand. He merely claimed it, a caretaker turned conqueror. Within, the white wizard paces his study, surrounded by scrolls, palantiri, and half-forgotten devices of the elves. He tells himself he studies to serve the Valar, but the truth hums beneath his words. He studies to rival them. Some say Gandalf foresaw this long before the council chose Saruman as their head. Others believe fate simply turned its wheel, and the eldest of the Istari found himself caught beneath it. You watch as Saruman lifts the seeing stone, the palantir, its black glass shimmering with hidden light. The surface ripples like water disturbed by a falling leaf. He whispers a word in the tongue of Aman, soft and sibilant, and for a moment you think you hear an answer from far beyond the mountains. His eyes widen, not with fear but fascination. That is the danger of great minds. They do not flee the flame, they lean toward it. Somewhere below, a smith stokes a forge. The sound of hissing iron rises through the tower's hollow core, echoing like the breath of a sleeping dragon. The air smells of parchment, oil, and ambition. You almost laugh, softly, because it feels absurdly mortal for such an immortal being, to lose himself over curiosity, like a scholar misplacing his soul between the pages of a book. Still, there's something tragic in it too. The elves once said that wisdom without wonder turns the heart to stone, and perhaps that is what's already happening here. You probably wouldn't survive a day under the shadow of Saruman's gaze. It's not a cruelty that kills, but a brilliance that burns everything too close. Outside, the mist thickens until Orthanc's peak disappears, and you're left with only the sound of dripping water and distant thunder. Somewhere beyond the white veil of fog, an unseen wind shifts, and for a fleeting moment, you imagine you hear a song, an old elvish lament carried by the air, whispering of things lost and things yet to be lost again. You stand there, listening, feeling the story begin to unfold, and in the quiet, one truth begins to form in your mind. Even the brightest white, left long enough in shadow, begins to turn gray. You climb the spiral steps within Orthanc, your hand brushing the smooth wall as the stone hums faintly beneath your touch. A vibration that feels alive, as though the tower itself disapproves of what it hears above. Saruman's voice drifts through the corridors, calm and sonorous, layered with that peculiar music only Maya speech can carry. It is beautiful at first, like hearing a river recite poetry. But as you listen longer, you notice something coiled beneath it, a subtle dissonance, the sound of persuasion sharpening itself into power. They called him Kurunir, the man of skill, yet in this hour his skill has turned to artifice. He speaks to himself, to the Palantir, to the very stones perhaps, weaving his thoughts into words so polished they gleam like gold, and like gold they tempt. His voice, once a beacon of counsel, now carries the rhythm of command, and you understand why even the wise trembled when he spoke in council. Some elves claimed that Saruman's speech could bend truth itself, that his tone could convince water to burn and wind to kneel, and though you doubt the poetry of it, you can't deny the way it moves through you. Knowledge, he says softly, is not evil. Only its use determines the name you think of Gandalf then, wandering in his gray cloak, content with riddles and pipe smoke, while Saruman stands wrapped in white, resenting the dust on his brother's boots. There was once affection between them, or so the chronicles say, before pride divided their purpose like a crack splitting marble. You pause beside an archway and look out toward the plains of Isengard. The fog has burned away now, revealing the long ridges of the White Mountains, and far beyond, the line of the Anduin glitters faintly in the morning sun. Somewhere out there, kingdoms rise and fall, yet here in Orthanc, one man's ambition hums louder than them all. There is an old tale told among the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, a belief that voices carry weight in the world, that a single word spoken with pure intent can shatter stone. Perhaps Saruman took that story too literally. He believes sound itself can rule the will. His laughter echoes down the stair, rich and smooth as honey, and yet the sweetness clings too long. You wonder how many times the White Council mistook this tone for sincerity. There is a scholarly debate among elven historians. Did Saruman fall because he listened too often to the Palantir, or because he began to believe his own voice more than the truth it once served? You suspect both. Power rarely arrives as thunder. It whispers, it compliments, it convinces. And Saruman, who once sought to understand the song of creation itself, has started humming a new tune, one composed in the minor key of vanity. He sits now before the seeing stone, robes gleaming like snow, his fingers tracing symbols in the air. You think, absurdly, that he looks like a conductor leading an invisible choir. What harm is there, he murmurs, in speaking with wisdom older than mine? He is speaking to no one, and to someone. The palantir stirs, light flaring in its core, faint and red like the heart of a volcano glimpsed through ash. You take an involuntary step back, because you swear you feel something looking back through it. The moment passes, and Saruman exhales, calm once more. He smiles thinly. He understands, he says to the empty air. He listens. You're not sure whether he means the Dark Lord, or the tower, or himself. The irony curls like smoke in your chest. Saruman, the master of voices, is slowly being mastered by one. Still, the tragedy is not yet visible. To most who meet him, he remains the White Wizard, wise and unwavering. Yet beneath that smooth exterior, a crack begins to widen. You hear the faint strain in his tone, the tremor of a man who has begun arguing with the echo of his own ambition. And when he turns from the window, you see a glimmer of something in his eyes. Not madness, not yet, but a fascination with the sound of his own certainty. You sigh quietly. It is the oldest story in Middle-earth. Even angels can fall if they start believing their reflections. You descend further into the hidden chambers beneath Orthanc, where the air grows warmer and metallic, scented with molten iron and the faint tang of strange herbs used in Saruman's secret experiments. Here, stone walls curve around massive hammers, forges, and chains that hum with energy, as though the mountain itself has been turned into a giant instrument of war. You can feel the vibrations through your boots, a slow rhythm like a heartbeat, or a warning. The White Wizard's ambition no longer rests on study and counsel. It manifests in steel and smoke. Sparks leap from anvils to ceiling, dancing briefly before fading, and you watch as half-formed weapons are shaped by unseen hands, or perhaps by hands guided too firmly by obsession. Saruman moves among them, robes smudged with soot, his white now tinged with ash, and he murmurs incantations older than Numenor, casting subtle spells into the very iron to harden it, bend it, imbue it with obedience. He does not laugh. He hums softly, a tune only he can hear, as if the rhythm of creation itself answers to his will. You notice an obscure artifact tucked into a corner, a miniature model of a ring, not the One Ring, yet similar in form, as if he is practicing what should not be practiced. This is the forge of the secret plan, the turning point where scholarship tips into tyranny. The dwarves once whispered that forges beneath mountains were alive, and that the first hammer strike could awaken the rock to serve its master or rebel. You feel that truth now. Orthanc listens, trembles, waits. Occasionally, a shadow flits along the walls, perhaps an orc scout or a stray thought given shape, and you shiver. You might chuckle quietly, remembering that Ents, though slow to anger, could topple mountains if provoked. Yet here, Saruman believes he can control them, or at least ignore their potential. There is a debate among scholars whether Saruman truly intended to dominate all of Middle-earth, or whether he simply wanted mastery over a single, perfect system, Orthanc and its secrets. Perhaps he convinces himself of the former to justify the latter. You follow him through narrow corridors lined with racks of weapons and tools, and it strikes you how eerily silent the chambers are, save for the hum of magic in metal, a sound that is almost musical, almost comforting, almost sinister. You think of the Silmarillion's brief mention of craftsmen who lost themselves to obsession, creating marvels that brought ruin, and you see the echo of that lesson here. Saruman, once a scholar and a teacher, now acts as if forging not only steel but destiny itself, and yet the laughter of history seems just beyond the walls, whispering that no forge can contain the mind it seeks to serve. You see Wormtongue pass by, silent as a shadow, carrying messages embroidered with subtle deceit. Saruman does not notice him, engrossed in shaping weapons, but you do. You note the tiny smile that crosses his lips as he contemplates the consequences, the delicate threads he weaves. There is one minor, almost forgotten custom of the Dunedain you recall, that even a trusted counselor's silence could speak louder than armies. You realize now that Wormtongue is more than a spy. He is a symptom of the very ambition that fuels the forge. The molten iron glows brighter, reflecting in Saruman's eyes, and you wonder whether he sees himself in the metal, or whether it merely reminds him of what he cannot yet control. Outside, distant crows circle the peak, calling as if to warn you. Even towers cannot hold back the tide of consequences. You pause, hand on the cold wall, and a whisper of humor escapes your lips. I suppose even the mightiest wizard must learn not to smudge his robes. Yet the jest dies in the hum of the forge, swallowed by fire and obsession. And as you stand there, breathing in the scent of iron and ambition, you understand with a quiet chill that what is being created here is not merely arms for war, but the architecture of downfall itself. Each hammer strike a footstep toward a fate that even the wisest among wizards might not escape. You follow the subtle trails of shadow and intrigue as Saruman turns his gaze outward toward the verdant fields of Rohan, where the wind carries the smell of grass, horse, and distant smoke from hearths, the life of men oblivious to the plotting overhead. Wormtongue slinks ahead like a living shadow, whispering insidious counsel to King Theoden, bending his thoughts with a poison so subtle that even the wisest might not detect its trace until it blossoms into ruin. You feel the chill of dread as you watch Theoden's eyes grow dim, a spark of vigor slowly replaced by the fog of manipulation, and the green fields, once bright under morning sun, begin to look muted, as though the grass itself senses the rot within the court. Saruman's plans are meticulous, armies raised in secret, whispers scattered like seeds of disease, a kingdom destabilized without a single sword being drawn yet. You hear the faint creak of Orthanc, as if the tower itself trembles with satisfaction, or perhaps with foreboding. There is an obscure Dunedain belief that whispers can carry as far as the ears are willing to listen, and here you feel that truth embodied. One tongue can shape the heart of many, yet the teller risks being ensnared by the very words he utters. Some scholars debate whether Saruman ever loved Rohan at all, or if it was merely a canvas for his cunning. Others argue that the wizard's fascination with horses, once pure and practical, became twisted into a desire to command life itself. You notice the subtle interplay of light and shadow in the halls of Meduseld, the golden throne room dimmed by intentional neglect, and a joke flickers in your mind about the king being as blinded as his counselors, yet it is uncomfortably apt. Beyond the palace windows, The wind stirs, carrying the faint scent of distant fire, a prelude to Entish wrath you do not yet perceive. Saruman's voice echoes faintly through the hills in command to his spies and servants, a sound soft yet insistent, like water eroding stone, gradual and unstoppable. You sense the subtle layering of deceit and strategy, the precision with which he plans not only for the fall of a kingdom, but for the emergence of his own authority in its place. There is a quiet terror in this realization. Manipulation does not leave a battlefield, yet its traces mark the hearts and minds of those who do not see it coming. Even as you take in the landscape, you notice the birds shifting in the sky, uneasy, as if aware of the corruption in the air, their wings slicing through the sunlit currents. Wormtongue pauses in the shadows, a grin almost imperceptible, and you recognize the unholy pleasure of the enabler, the subtle humor of one who thrives in the cracks between trust and betrayal. Somewhere, Gandalf watches from afar, and you imagine him calculating not how to punish, but how to preserve what can be preserved. Some say he foresaw Theoden's manipulation, others that he simply understood the human heart too well to interfere too soon. You marvel at the orchestration, at the layers of intent and counterintent, and a faint, dry chuckle escapes your lips. So human, so ridiculous, to watch a kingdom bend under invisible strings while the world beyond remains blissfully unaware. The plains of Rohan stretch endlessly, bright green and shining under the mid-morning sun, yet even as you admire them, you feel the dark pulse of ambition radiating from Orthanc, a force patient, precise, and indifferent to consequence. Each whispered word, each subtle suggestion, is a brushstroke in a masterpiece of control, and you shiver with the knowledge that the most dangerous invasions often require no army at all, only the artful hand of a mind that has forgotten the boundaries of empathy and restraint. You step back from the window, sensing the full weight of what is unfolding. A kingdom bending to voice and subtle intent, a wizard enthralled by his own cleverness, and you, an unwilling witness, caught in the quiet awe and fear of seeing power shaped without lifting a blade. You stand at the edge of the forest, feeling the deep tremor of the Ent's march, before you even hear the first footsteps, the ground vibrating as if the mountain itself has decided to move against Orthanc. The slow, deliberate fury of these ancient shepherds of the trees is unlike anything you have ever witnessed. Gnarled limbs swinging, roots tearing through stone, their eyes alight with a righteous, ancient anger that predates men, elves, and even some of the wizards themselves. Saruman's fortress, once a monument to learning and patience, is now a cage of his own making, walls blackened with smoke, furnaces roaring in futile defiance, and the waters of the river rising to flood the foundations. You notice the cleverness of the wizard, spies, fortifications, traps. But even his ingenuity cannot match the raw, relentless patience of living earth. There is a faint, almost forgotten elvish tale of trees that once walked to defend the Valar's gardens, an echo of that myth playing out now with terrifying reality. You feel the irony pulse like a heartbeat. Saruman, who sought to command all, now faces forces that require neither magic nor malice to prevail, only the inexorable will of the natural world. Some historians debate whether the Ents were truly stirred by grief for the forests alone, or whether Gandalf's counsel was the spark. You see it now as both, a perfect alignment of sorrow and wisdom. The mud of Isengard rises around your boots as you watch the walls crack under immense, patient pressure, water spilling over battlements, fire sputtering against stone, soaked with centuries of rain. You almost laugh at the absurdity. Armies of iron and enchantment toppled by lumber and patience. Yet beneath the humor lies a creeping dread, a reminder that the universe seldom respects arrogance. Saruman peers from a high window, robes darkened by soot and ash, staff clenched, eyes wide with disbelief and fury. His voice, once commanding, now cracks against the crescendo of collapsing towers, the roar of uprooted trees, the river surging like an angry sea. You catch a fleeting glimpse of Wormtongue slipping among the chaos, muttering, scheming, yet powerless to alter the course of this judgment. The tower's peak trembles, and you note a small joke forming at the corner of your mind. Even the cleverest of hands cannot clap against a forest of giants. Yet it is not entirely humorous. The collapse is precise, inevitable, and somehow mournful. Sparks from the burning forges scatter into the darkening sky, flickering like distant stars, and you remember a tiny, almost forgotten dwarvish adage: metal may bend, but roots remember the strike. You sense, too, the scholarly debate forming in your mind. Did Saruman underestimate the Ents, or did he simply overestimate himself? You feel the answer as you watch the doors of Orthanc shatter under the weight of living wood, water rushing through cracks and fissures, steam rising where fire meets flood. The White Wizard moves frantically, issuing commands that cannot reach ears that do not listen, and even the palantir in his hand seems to flare briefly, confused by the sheer unpredictability of natural wrath. You feel the vibration of the earth beneath your feet, the scent of wet bark and smoke filling your senses, and you understand, with a thrill and a shiver, that power measured only in cunning and craft cannot contend with the deliberate patience of life itself. The Ents push forward, slow and inexorable, and the fortress begins to resemble less a monument to learning than a ruin preordained. Saruman's voice, once so hypnotic and commanding, now drifts into the chaos like smoke through shattered windows, powerless against the natural judgment he sought to ignore. You take a deep breath of the damp, cold air, and a quiet, almost cheeky thought rises in your mind. Perhaps the trees were the wisest of all. Wizards, patient, enduring, and relentless, and in that realization, you sense that this siege, this slow but certain fall, is not merely destruction. It is the turning of the world back to balance, a lesson in humility written in stone, wood, and water. You climb the shattered stairs to Orthanc's upper levels, heart beating in tandem with the tremor of the tower and the distant roar of the Ents' march, and find Saruman at the window, white robes torn and smudged with ash, fingers gripping the sill as though it were a lifeline. His eyes, once bright with certainty, now flicker with desperation. And you sense that for the first time, the wizard realizes that eloquence alone cannot tame consequence. Outside, the sky is a muted gray, the river swollen and angry, trees swaying violently as though aware of the wizard's hubris. And in that moment, even the wind seems to whisper admonition. Saruman lifts his staff and speaks, voice weaving through the air, attempting to charm, to bargain, to redirect the tide of anger he cannot stop. He still believes in the power of persuasion, though the air carries no heed. You notice the subtle tension in his stance, a minuscule falter in posture that betrays his awareness of being cornered. Not by enemies armed with steel, but by nature, consequence, and the echo of every choice he has made. Some argue among scholars that this moment is the pivot of his undoing, the realization that power, when hoarded and manipulated, can isolate even the wisest from all allies. You see it here, the isolation palpable, a physical weight pressing down as heavily as the stones surrounding you. Wormtongue hovers nearby, attempting counsel, but his words fall flat, bouncing off the stubborn conviction of a man who has already heard too much and now trusts only his own interpretation of events. Saruman speaks to the Palantir again, voice quivering slightly, and for a fleeting second, the stone glows not with command but with reflection, showing him glimpses of failure he cannot yet fully comprehend. You step closer, and a faint joke crosses your mind, wry and bitter. He could command armies and metals, yet cannot convince a window to stay open. Outside, branches scrape against broken battlements, and rain begins to fall, pattering against stone with a rhythm that seems to echo the inevitability of fate. The debate lingers in your mind. Did Saruman truly believe he could sway the world, or was he simply enamored with the sound of his own reasoning? His eyes dart across the ruined courtyard, searching for allies, for escape, for some invisible lever that might turn back the clock. But you feel the futility, the quiet inevitability of this moment. He gestures once more, and his words attempt to twist the chaos into submission. Yet the elements, the ants, and the memory of every slighted council member resist in ways he cannot command. You notice the subtle gleam in his expression, a last trace of the man who believes logic can bend life. Yet even this is tempered by the awareness of encroaching impotence. Somewhere far below, the river churns, dragging debris and splintered wood past the shattered walls, a song of slow, relentless judgment. And you inhale the sharp scent of wet stone and sap, understanding that this is not merely a fall from grace, but a reckoning written in natural law. The air vibrates with tension, and you almost hear the echo of a forgotten elvish proverb. Words that once commanded will serve only to remind the speaker of his limits. Saruman's lips move again, offering entreaties to unseen ears. Yet the world beyond Orthanc has ceased listening. You watch him for a long moment, realizing the theater of power has ended, leaving only a man, surrounded by the consequences of his ambition. And you shiver slightly at the irony that the very voice that once bent kings and wizards alike now trembles against wind and rain, echo and silence, aware too late that not all persuasion can stave off destiny. You follow Saruman as he departs Orthanc, staff broken, robes frayed, the glow of his once proud white aura dulled to a grayish hue. And you notice how each step he takes seems heavier than the last, burdened not by stone or mud, but by the weight of choices now fully visible. He moves slowly along the road that winds through the hills, past forests scarred by his ambition, and fields that bear the memory of Wormtongue's whispered deceit. a man diminished yet still clinging to remnants of pride. Occasionally, he glances at the Palantir, now silent and inert, and you realize that even the device meant to extend his reach offers nothing but reflection of loss. The wind carries the faint rustle of leaves and the soft murmur of distant streams, a gentle reminder that the world continues beyond the span of one wizard's dominion. There is a peculiar, almost forgotten hobbit custom of leaving small gifts along roadsides to honor travelers. You imagine if such tiny acts of kindness had reached him in Orthanc, might a different choice have been made? Saruman shakes his head slightly, muttering to himself. Words that once commanded, now half lost in wind, seeking an audience that no longer listens. You feel the stark irony. The master of voice and persuasion, now reduced to murmurs that cannot sway even the echoes of his own steps. The scholarly debate lingers in your mind. Did the fall of the White Wizard arise from deliberate hubris? Or was it the inevitable outcome of intertwining ambition with obsession? You sense the truth is woven of both, as clear as the light fading over the distant mountains. Wormtongue trails behind him, servile yet cautious, aware that the journey offers no easy triumph. Even the manipulator fears the consequences of his own cunning. You notice Saruman pause at the crest of a hill, looking back at Isengard, now a sodden ruin, towers half submerged, forges silenced, and water sweeping through where stone once stood tall. His shoulders sag momentarily, not with exhaustion, but with recognition of what cannot be undone. A faint joke occurs to you, a wry, almost cheeky thought. One cannot storm a kingdom when the trees rise first. Yet beneath the humor lies the melancholy of a man confronting the erosion of influence, the collapse of dreams, and the stark realization that exile is not merely physical, but spiritual. You follow him across plains, through shadowed woods, past streams where moonlight dances upon ripples, and you notice his eyes, once fierce and commanding, now flicker with fleeting glimpses of self-reflection, the faintest acknowledgement of regret. He mutters to himself, murmurs to the wind, and occasionally stops, listening as though the world might answer, though it does not. The air carries the smell of damp earth, faint smoke from distant hearths, and the metallic tang of ruined forges, all blending into a tapestry that marks the passage from power to obscurity. You wonder, almost audibly, if the world will ever forgive him, or if forgiveness was ever his to seek. The wind lifts again, brushing against your face, carrying whispers of forgotten songs, and in their soft cadence, you perceive a strange comfort. The road is long, yet not cruel. It teaches rather than punishes. Saruman walks on, a shadow of his former self, staff in hand, not as conqueror but as wanderer, stripped of title and grandeur, yet still clinging to the threads of identity he can salvage. You realize, quietly, that the fall of a wizard is rarely marked by a single instant, but by the slow erosion of all that once defined him, leaving only the echo of brilliance and the memory of choices made. And as he moves, you notice the faint glimmer of a man still possessed of thought, curiosity, and the tiniest spark of pride,
a stubborn ember in the cold sweep of consequence.
You walk beside Saruman along the quiet, winding paths that lead away from the ruins of Isengard, the air soft with the scent of rain-soaked grass and the distant murmur of the Anduin. And you notice how the light has shifted to the gentle gold of late afternoon, spilling across hills and forests like a balm over grief. He moves slowly now, staff tapping softly against stone and soil, a sound as rhythmic as a heartbeat. And you realize this is a journey not of conquest, but of reflection, a slow reckoning with the consequences of ambition unchecked. The Shire spreads in the distance, rolling hills dotted with round doors and smoke curling from chimneys, a landscape untouched by the folly of powerful minds. And you sense a quiet irony in Saruman's eyes, an awareness that he who sought dominion now travels through lands that would never yield to him. Wormtongue lingers behind, silent, the weight of complicity pressing upon him as he observes the slow unraveling of his master. And you almost hear the whisper of history itself, recounting lessons long ignored. Somewhere, a bird calls from a branch, its note clear against the rustle of leaves, and you feel the profound stillness of consequence. It does not shout. It does not rage. It arrives quietly, carrying the echoes of decisions past. You notice a soft trickle of water along the roadside, the river's song soothing, like a lullaby of the earth itself, carrying away the remnants of power and pride, and the trees sway gently, whispering their own quiet judgment. The sun dips low, painting the sky with muted pinks and blues, and for a moment, Saruman pauses, head bowed, as though listening to the world he once sought to command, now offering only reflection. You remember a small, obscure tale from the Red Book, mentioning how even the wisest of Istari could be humbled not by foes, but by the patient passage of time and the steadfastness of lands they sought to control. A faint smile touches your lips as you note the subtle, almost playful thought that even the greatest of wizards cannot outrun the quiet persistence of nature and the steady rhythm of living things. Around you, the air grows cooler, the scent of damp earth and wildflowers mixing with the lingering smoke from distant hearths, and you feel a gentle hush settling over the scene, as though the world itself exhales after a long-held breath. Saruman steps slow even further, his staff dragging softly, and you realize that in this exile, stripped of power yet still alive, there is a peculiar dignity, the chance to walk unobserved, to ponder, to reflect, and perhaps, in time, to understand. The river glimmers in fading light, casting reflections that ripple and dance across its surface, while the stars begin their timid ascent, pale pinpricks in the growing dusk, offering a silent reminder of vastness, patience, and enduring wonder. The wind carries faint laughter, memories of counsel, moments of triumph and misjudgment, and you take a deep breath, feeling the serenity wrap around you like a cloak. For a final 100 paces, the journey slows almost to nothing, a gentle closure in which you hear the rustle of leaves, the soft plash of water, the distant song of a lark, and you sense that stories of ambition, pride, and fall continue quietly, woven into the land and whispered by the wind. You glance at Saruman one last time, a figure diminished yet not erased, and feel the soft cadence of history settle in your mind. Even the mightiest can fade, yet life in its quiet persistence carries on, teaching in the gentlest of ways the value of restraint, humility, and patience. And as the light of dusk glows softly across the Shire and the stars strengthen above, you let the story rest, the rivers hum, the glow of starlight, and the hush of a fading campfire accompanying your thoughts. A lullaby for minds both mortal and immortal.